He was the first person to ever say those iconic words. Live from New York, it's Saturday night.
Live from New York, it's Saturday night!
Chevy Chase was born into America's richest families, but his childhood was pure hell. His mother would wake him up just to slap him. She locked him in closets and basements for days. By age 14, he'd been expelled from 5 schools. Then came Saturday Night Live in 1975. One night, an actor didn't show up. Chevy stepped in with a crossed-out cue card that wasn't supposed to happen. That mistake made him famous overnight. But what happened next would destroy friendships, spark violent fights, and reveal a dark side that Hollywood tried to bury. Chevy Chase was born into a world of wealth, but not comfort. His full name was Cornelius Crane Chase, and he entered the world on October 8, 1943, in Manhattan. His mother was a talented concert pianist, and his father edited books. Both came from the Vanderbilt Crane line, one of America's richest families. Summers were spent at Castle Hill, a mansion with 59 rooms that looked like it belonged in a fairy tale. But inside the walls of his own home, Chevy said he was terrified almost every day. His mother would sometimes wake him in the middle of the night just to slap him. She locked him in closets. After he got suspended from school at 14, she locked him in the basement for days, giving him only a pitcher of water. His stepfather, Dr. John Cedarquist, added to the cruelty. At 5 every evening, Chevy would receive 10 lashes, like it was part of a schedule. And even though his family had money all around them, his grandfather left nothing to his mother. Chevy grew up watching the fortune slip further away, right through his fingers. There's a wild story that keeps popping up about Chevy being stabbed 3 times in a fight when he was 8. Supposedly, it happened in Harlem, but no police report ever mentioned it, and his official biographies don't either. Not even his own. Writers and fact-checkers have gone digging through old newspapers and court records from that year. Nothing. Just more stories about slaps and broken noses. Not knives. Still, people keep repeating it. Maybe because the truth about his childhood was already so rough that adding a knife fight almost made sense. But until someone finds actual proof, it's just another rumor. When Chevy was 4, his world took another hit. His parents got divorced. His father remarried quickly, this time into the Folgers coffee family. That meant even more money on that side of the fence, and Chevy only saw his dad 2 Sundays a month. Meanwhile, his mother kept moving on, marrying more men. In 1956, she married the strict psychoanalyst who would become Chevy's stepfather. That meant more rules, more punishment, and a home that never felt safe. By the time he was 10, Chevy had already been to 3 different elementary schools. Every summer, he was sent off again to Massachusetts, or New Hampshire, or Long Island. It felt like the ground was always shifting. He couldn't settle in. Even by the time he graduated high school in 1962, he had been kicked out of some of the top prep schools in the country. At one point, he had changed schools 5 times. He once said that nothing in his life ever felt steady. His nickname didn't come from an agent or some Hollywood script. It came from his grandmother. She loved a town in Maryland called Chevy Chase and started calling her grandson that around 1945. That town actually got its name from an old English ballad about a bloody border fight in the Cheviot Hills. So the name Chevy Chase came from 2 places at once, a posh suburb and a medieval war story. It's funny how that combination of upper-class shine and violent chaos would later match his comedy style so well. Even in high school, he had a reputation as a prankster. At the Stockbridge School, yearbooks called him the king of jokes, but his jokes weren't always harmless. He loved shock value. At Haverford College, one of his roommates remembered him doing cafeteria skits that involved forks and body parts. He'd throw himself down staircases just to get a laugh. That kind of physical comedy became his trademark later, but it started early. One of his most infamous pranks happened at Phillips Exeter. He and a few friends managed to drag a Volkswagen Beetle. yes, a full car, into the school's chapel and leave it under the pulpit before a big assembly. The car was still running when it was discovered at 6 in the morning. School was canceled while workers tried to figure out how to remove it. They had to dismantle part of a doorway just to get it out. Chevy was expelled immediately, ending a long family tradition of Chase men attending Exeter. He was just 17. That fall, he tried again at Haverford College, but by the following spring, he was kicked out once more. This time, he and a group of students somehow led a full-grown cow up to the 3rd floor of their dorm building. The problem is that cows don't like going downstairs. The poor animal had to be sedated and lifted out the window. It left behind hoof marks and piles of manure. The cleanup cost over $1,000. The school expelled him for endangerment and property damage. Years later, Chevy called the whole thing utterly unfair. Still, he wanted to finish college. In January 1963, he enrolled at Beaver College, but by May, he was out again. This time for forging chapel attendance cards. He had faked 64 of them. After getting rejected from several other schools, Chevy finally managed to get into Bard College that fall. A cousin on the board pulled some strings, and Chevy was allowed in, on probation. That was his 3rd attempt at freshman year in less than 3 years. At Bard, things started to click. On Halloween in 1967, he played drums at a college gig with 2 fellow students, Donald Fagen and Walter Becker. Their band was called Leather Canary. They were loud, messy, and didn't think much of their sound. Fagen later said one of their songs was so bad, it convinced them to start writing their own music. That decision would eventually lead to Steely Dan. Chevy didn't stick with the group. He said they were just a bad jazz band with louder amps. But in photos from that night, you can see him grinning behind the drum kit, a cigarette hanging from his mouth, totally unaware that he was on stage with future rock legends. After college in '67, he jumped between anything that paid rent. He delivered packages on motorcycles, drove trucks, moved furniture, rang up produce, sold wine, taught tennis, mixed drinks in a lesbian bar, and even worked as an usher in a theater. He collected rejection letters from agents and stapled them above the kitchen sink, just to stay motivated. By 1972, he was eating canned pasta most nights and still finding time to play midnight jazz gigs with a group called Chamailian Church. The pay was lousy, maybe $40 a night, but it kept him moving. All those odd jobs taught him how to fall. Literally. The same clumsy moves that got him laughs on Saturday Night Live were sharpened on slippery staircases and clunky loading docks. The first real comedy paycheck didn't come until 1975. It was $600 for writing gags on a short-lived revival of the Smothers Brothers. The show didn't last, but his writing packet landed in the right hands. That same year, he found himself squeezed into a tiny recording studio on West 57th Street with a few other future legends: John Belushi, Gilda Radner, Bill Murray. They were all working on the National Lampoon Radio Hour, writing skits with titles like Dial a Douche, and recording long days on 8-track tape for just $350 a week. It wasn't glamorous, but it was raw and risky and free from commercials. And more importantly, it gave him the kind of sharp edge that SNL would build its brand on. Everything shifted one spring night in 1975 outside a movie theater in LA. The film was Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Chevy was in line cracking jokes about coconuts with Rob Reiner, not knowing that standing just a few feet behind them was a Canadian producer named Lorne Michaels. Reiner introduced them. Michaels asked him to send over some material that same night. According to the story, Chevy scribbled a fake news story on the back of his ticket. 2 days later, he had an offer: $800 a week to write for a new show that didn't even have a name yet. That contract, signed in July, officially made him a writer. But during rehearsals, an actor didn't show up. Chevy stepped in, took a clumsy fall, and shouted, "Live from New York! It's Saturday night!" That wasn't planned. but producer Dick Ebersol told him to keep it. When the first episode aired on October 11, 1975, Chevy was in almost every sketch. He anchored the very first Weekend Update. He earned $800 as a writer and another $750 as a performer, making him the highest-paid cast member on that debut night. By the end of the season, he wasn't just getting laughs. He was winning awards. He looked straight into the camera, smirked, and said it, "I'm Chevy Chase, and you're not." That single line blew up. By Thanksgiving, people were quoting it in schools, in elevators, on T-shirts. He had flipped a phrase that sounded presidential into a mockery of fame itself, and audiences couldn't get enough. NBC had to start cracking down on bootleg merch because more than 15,000 shirts had already been sold before Christmas. And nearly 50 years later, Weekend Update anchors still begin with their own twist on that same line. Just 8 weeks after that first show, New York Magazine put him on the cover. They called him the funniest man in America. Offers started pouring in. Columbia Pictures dangled $1 million movie deal. The Tonight Show wanted him as a guest host. He was just 32 and already the biggest name on TV. But inside 30 Rock, the mood was changing fast. Belushi hated how fast Chevy was rising. So did others. He would take over sketches, brag about his movie offers, talk down to the writers, and call himself more important than the bearded background guys. Even meetings were split, one for Chevy, one for everyone else. He was collecting Emmys while the rest of the cast just collected frustration. Then he walked away. On October 30th, 1976, after just 15 months on air, Chevy signed off from Weekend Update and left the show entirely. Officially, it was about love. His fiancée didn't want to live in New York, but insiders knew he had 7 movie offers on the table, worth millions. And he wanted a raise that NBC wouldn't give. Lorne Michaels said no. Chevy quit. Jane Curtin had just 1 day to take over Update. Bill Murray joined a few episodes later. The cast was in shock. Belushi taped Chevy's nameplate to a toilet seat. That pretty much summed up how everyone felt. When Chevy returned to host in 1978, it didn't go well. Just before the live show started, he barged into Bill Murray's dressing room, demanding to take back Weekend Update. They traded insults. Murray, fed up with being compared to the new Chevy, snapped. A fight broke out. They swung punches in the hallway while poor John Belushi, caught in the middle, got hit trying to break it up. The director remembers writers holding both men back as the clock ticked toward air. Then, minutes later, Chevy went on stage, still breathing hard, and performed as Gerald Ford, falling all over the set like nothing happened. Only in live TV can you go from fistfight to sketch in 5 minutes flat. But one insult stuck. During the argument, Chevy looked at Murray and said his face looked like the moon, scarred and cratered. Murray came back with, "You're a medium talent." That one stung too, especially in a room full of comedians. It was enough to turn shouting into swinging. Dan Aykroyd, already in costume, had to separate them. He yanked one toward the stage and shoved the other in the opposite direction with barely a minute to spare. That night's biggest success wasn't a sketch. It was keeping 2 future Ghostbusters from killing each other. Chevy Chase was barely known when he walked onto the screen with Goldie Hawn in Foul Play. It was July 1978, and the film only cost $6.5 million to make. But by the time the summer ended, it had made $44.5 million. No one saw that coming, especially not the awards attention. Chase, who'd only just left Saturday Night Live, was suddenly being nominated for a Golden Globe. Paramount didn't hesitate. They doubled his asking price overnight. Just like that, he went from $125,000 to $250,000 per movie. He had won the part by doing something wild. He improvised an entire interrogation scene on the spot during his screen test. The producers had wanted Steve Martin originally, but he wasn't available. So they took a chance on Chase, and that one risk launched him. 2 years later, Caddyshack hit theaters. It cost $6 million to make and pulled in nearly $40 million. That may not sound huge today, but in 1980, it was a monster hit, and Chase's laid-back golfer character became iconic. "Be the ball," he said. "Nah, nah, 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 nah." People still quote those lines. ESPN even called it the funniest sports movie ever made. One of Chase's scenes, where he reacts to an off-screen golf ball, was completely unscripted. The director just told him to react, and Chevy did it 23 times, each one different. It made Bill Murray crack up so much. They had to use real laughter in the final cut. Warner Brothers gave Chase a cut of the profits. He ended up making $3.5 million, more than half the film's entire budget. Then came National Lampoon's Vacation in 1983, and that changed everything. The movie made over $61 million on a $15 million budget, but the real story was what followed. Clark Griswold, Chase's everyman character, was such a hit that Six Flags even remodeled one of their roller coasters to match the film. MGM saw the potential. Internal memos later revealed they believed the Griswold brand would eventually be worth over $1 billion. Between TV reruns, VHS sales, theme park tie-ins, and even toy cars based on the film, they were right. For the sequel, Chase got smart. He signed a deal for $5 million plus 10% of the profits. By 1987, that added up to almost $10 million, making him the highest-paid movie dad of the decade. Just 2 years later, Fletch came out and pushed him even higher. The film made $59.6 million worldwide, and Chevy took home a $7 million paycheck. That was nearly the entire budget. But Fletch wasn't just another comedy. It was a masterclass in improvisation. The director let him make up most of the dialogue. Chase invented more than 60 characters, even though the script only had 18. Some of the funniest moments, the fake passport, the Dr. Rosen penis line, came from pure on-the-spot riffing. Test audiences laughed so hard, the studio had to go back and extend some of the scenes just to give people time to recover. Decades later, Fletch still ranks as one of the most beloved comedies of the 80s. By 1986, he had officially made it. According to Variety, Chevy Chase was earning $7 million per film, second only to Sylvester Stallone. That's about $21 million today. His contracts had insane perks: a private jet for press tours, no filming on weekends, and even veto power over the clothes he wore on screen. For Vacation, he reportedly turned down 27 pairs of jeans before picking a basic Sears pair. People joked that his wardrobe decisions cost more than the catering, but studios didn't care. The numbers made sense. Between 1978 and 1985, Chase's movies earned $205 million on just $45 million in production costs. He was Hollywood's golden goose, but behind all that, something darker was growing. In early 1980, while shooting Modern Problems, Chase was nearly killed. A dream sequence involved attaching aircraft landing lights directly onto his skin. During a test, something short-circuited. Over 1,000 milliamps of current shot through his neck and spine. He blacked out. They rushed him to the hospital. Doctors said 75 milliamps can stop a human heart. He had taken 13 times that. He survived, but something in him cracked. The accident came just 6 weeks after a close friend, Doug Kenny, had died in Hawaii. At the same time, his marriage to Jacqueline Carlin was falling apart. Chase spiraled. He isolated himself in a Malibu house, slept for 14 hours a day, lost weight, stopped taking studio calls. Friends said he barely left the house. That summer, the Screen Actors Guild went on strike, but Chase didn't join the rallies. "I almost died," he said. "I don't care if my career does too." That wasn't the only physical damage showbiz had done to him. Back in his SNL days, he had done so many falls and stunts that he fractured a vertebra. Records show NBC doctors gave him Percodan regularly just to keep him moving. By the mid-80s, he was reportedly taking up to 60 pills a week. In one interview, he said, "People thought I was on coke, but it was my back." He eventually entered rehab. On September 1, 1986, His publicist confirmed that Chevy Chase had checked into the Betty Ford Center. The clinic used the code name CC2146 to hide his identity. He stayed for 28 days. The cost? $11,000. His doctor diagnosed him with multiple drug dependencies, mainly opioids. When he left, one of the conditions was that he couldn't do solo press tours for 6 months. It even delayed the promotion for Three Amigos. Personal life wasn't much calmer. His first marriage to Susan Hewitt fell apart as his fame exploded. They had married in 1973. 3 months later, he landed the SNL pilot. The schedule was brutal. Hewitt later said they had dinner together maybe 4 times during the entire season. When he decided to leave the show and head to Hollywood, she filed for divorce. Just a few months after it became official, Foul Play hit theaters and made more money in 10 days than they had earned in 3 years of marriage. But even success had limits. In 1987, the Academy Awards gave Chase the mic. He walked out, looked at the crowd of celebrities, and opened with, "Good evening, Hollywood phonies." It got a chuckle, but not a warm one. The next year, he tried again, same line. But this time he added a fake sneeze, then dropped his pants next to Paul Newman. Critics shredded him. One paper called it parched, drab, and leaden. Another said he stopped the show cold. The audience was massive, 70 million viewers, but he was never invited back. He blamed the Writers Guild strike. Insiders blamed arrogance. Then came 1993. Fox bet everything on him. They gutted the Aquarius Theater, renamed it the Chevy Chase Theater, and gave him a late-night talk show. But it was a disaster. The premiere pulled in 4.9 million viewers, already half of what they'd promised. Within 3 weeks, that number dropped below 2 million. Critics were brutal. One review called him completely unsuited to the format. After just 29 episodes, they pulled the plug. 5 weeks. That was it. The theater's marquee came down within 2 days. Reruns were still airing when his name was already gone. Chase later admitted he never liked the idea of being tied to a desk. But by then, it was too late. His image had taken a major hit. There were also some decisions he probably never stopped regretting. Back in 1978, Paramount offered him the lead in American Gigolo. He turned it down, saying it was too sexual for his comedy brand. Richard Gere took the role. The film became a hit, earned $22 million, and turned Gere into a style icon. Sales of Armani suits jumped 30%. Chase missed all of it. Years later, he admitted it was a mistake. He also passed on Ghostbusters and Forrest Gump, decisions that reshaped Hollywood, just not in his favor. The final blow came quietly. Between 1991 and 1997, Chase released a string of films that just didn't land. Nothing But Trouble was a box office disaster. Memoirs of an Invisible Man flopped too. Cops and Robertsons went nowhere. Even Disney's Man of the House couldn't fix it. Then came Vegas Vacation. Despite a big budget, it barely earned anything overseas and fell flat at home. Studios stopped offering him top billing. For more than 10 years, Chevy Chase faded from the front of the marquee. Chevy Chase was supposed to have his big comeback in 2009. NBC had cast him as Pierce Hawthorne in a new comedy called Community, hoping this would be his second act. On paper, it was a great idea. A legendary comedian returning to weekly TV in a smart, quirky show. But that excitement didn't last. Just 2 weeks into filming, the mood shifted. Chase began demanding last-minute script changes and once even walked off the set before they were finished, forcing the crew to work overtime just to fix the mess. One moment that still sticks with people happened during a pixelated 8-bit themed episode. It had a touching final scene, but Chase refused to do it. He didn't think it was funny. The crew had to beg him. Knowing the set was being torn down that night, the directors called the entire experience unpredictable. Each day, they had to prepare a backup plan in case their lead actor walked out again. That tension only grew worse when it came to Donald Glover. Glover was 26 when filming started. Chase was 65. But instead of mentoring the young actor, Chase started making crude jokes, many of them racist. Glover later recalled Chase telling him flat out, in the middle of a take, that people only found him funny because he was black. It didn't stop there. Things escalated during season 3, when Chase shouted the N-word twice on set in front of dozens of extras. That incident triggered an emergency meeting with Sony. Joel McHale said it got so bad, they started changing where people sat during table reads just to keep Glover away from Chase. Glover told Harmon he wasn't bothered, but everyone around them could feel the damage. The set didn't feel safe anymore. The breaking point came in March 2012. At the season 3 wrap party, the show's creator Dan Harmon took the microphone and led a chant that stunned everyone. Over 100 people, cast and crew, shouted, "Fuck you, Chevy," while Chase stood there with his wife and young daughter. Chase stormed out. Hours later, he left Harmon a furious voicemail, threatening to kick his teeth in. Harmon didn't just listen to it. He played the whole thing at his podcast. The clip went viral almost instantly. Sony was furious, not just at Chase, but also at Harmon for making the fight public. Advertisers started getting nervous. Later that year, it got even worse. On October 16, 2012, during a rehearsal, Chase grew angry again. His character once more was being used to insult the others. In frustration, he shouted, "What am I supposed to do next? Call Shirley the N-word." And then, right in front of the cast and crew, he actually said the slur. The room froze. The cameras had been rolling. The footage exists, but is locked away, seen only by Sony's legal team. The production manager immediately shut everything down. Over 100 crew members were sent home early, costing the production tens of thousands in penalties. Glover and Yvette Nicole Brown left in tears. NBC locked down the footage, making sure it could never leak. The damage wasn't just emotional. It was financial, concrete, and massive. After that, there was no saving things. On November 21, 2012, Chase walked into a meeting with Sony and NBC with his lawyer. He said he was done pretending to be a racist for laughs. They worked out an agreement that let him finish just 11 episodes out of the 13 planned. He left the set, again leaving a new voicemail for Harmon. Just as vulgar, this time ending with the sound of a toilet flushing. That message leaked too. And when Community returned in 2014, his character had died off-screen. Just like that, Pierce Hawthorne was gone, and so was Chevy. But the fallout didn't stop there. Years later, in 2024, Joel McHale spoke openly about how Chase would constantly push for physical fights on set. He once told McHale to hit him for real, and ended up with a dislocated shoulder. McHale even joked that he had to write a step-by-step guide for how to handle fighting Chevy Chase. That wasn't just a joke. It was a sign of how bad things had become behind the scenes. In 2016, Chase entered rehab for alcohol addiction. He was 73. It wasn't the first time. He'd been to the Betty Ford Clinic decades earlier, but now he said he just wanted to get better. At the time, he had 2 movies in production. Both stalled while he was in treatment. Friends told the press he was afraid of slipping into the same spiral that nearly ruined him in the 1980s. Then came the final blow. When the long-awaited Community movie finally got the green light in 2023, everyone noticed something. One name was missing. Joel McHale returned. Donald Glover returned. But there would be no Pierce Hawthorne. Dan Harmon joked that the only way Chase would appear is if a fan edited him in from an old movie. For a show that constantly referenced its own past, erasing a character entirely was unheard of. But they did it anyway. Today, the man who once earned $7 million per film spends his weekends signing autographs at fan expos. He sells autographed VHS tapes for $85 on Instagram and posts discount codes for t-shirts. His name is still known, but the acting gigs are gone. Instead of red carpets, it's nostalgia screenings and podcast rants. His former co-stars still get movie roles. He sells merch. Once one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, Chevy Chase now works the autograph table like a ghost of himself, cheerful on the outside, but far from the spotlight that once made him famous.